We built the website, we put it up, and we thought, okay, that's just a nice little idea. We can sort of, when we're talking to people, we can link them to the website and they can see a sort of demo. And what then happened a couple of days later was that the website crashed, and we actually thought to ourselves, okay, we just built like badly built thing, whatever, it fell over or something. And then James looked at it and he saw the analytics and he sort of said, no, hang on a minute, actually, the reason it crashed is because there's this huge spike and there's all these people who've come to see what we're doing.
We need to start making more conscious material choices.
I set up an initiative called Make Fashion Circular.
It's a tsunami of change.
Tell us, are we going to face a future of goods that are locally produced?
I think we are already seeing that happening. I think it's for different reasons and in different scales. As you said, in some ways things were always made locally, and maybe it is a return to that, but we're really seeing technology powering not only the making through digital tools and processes, but also the reach. So we're seeing people being able to reach big audiences from very small scale kind of craft making workshops, and we're talking about fashion, we're talking about food, and in our case we're talking about furniture.
And that's is purely down to the power of the internet that we're finding out more about people who can do the making for us?
I think it's a combination of the reach and the accessibility, but then also a shift in consumer kind of positioning. So I think a lot more people actually care about the things that they consume, that they use. They want to know, for example, the provenance of things, like where their food has been produced, what's gone into it. They want to know how it's packaged. They want to get rid of the packaging. When it comes to fashion, they want to make sure that no one was exploited in the making. And with furniture, it's a similar thing. Like people want to find sustainable materials, and they really connect with the narrative of the story that someone locally is making something. It benefits the local economy. So we're really seeing that shift. I think technology is just powering it. It's just a tool that kind of enables this to grow and to increasingly happen.
Great. I'd love to delve a little bit more into that sort of mindset of the end user. But let's stick with the technologies just now. What are the technologies that can make local making of goods really come to life?
Well, I think there's a whole host of digital tools that we're excited about, and we looked into digital fabrication. So, of course, people are familiar with 3D printing, and it was quite a hyped kind of idea. This idea that you could literally print something on your kitchen top. If you broke a mug, you just print another one. There are, I think, some inherent problems with that thinking. It's not necessarily the right way to use that sort of technology, but there are really interesting things now being done in that. For example, printing with biomaterials, recycled materials. In our case, we got really excited about CNC technology, which is the CNC stands for computer numerically controlled. So as you can see on the image there, it's basically like a cutting machine. So we think of it like a big printer. You're sending a drawing to a printer. Instead of drawing things out with a pen, you're actually cutting shapes like a jigsaw out of a sheet of material. In our case, it's wood that's grown in a sustainable way. In the future, it could be recycled plastics or other interesting things. So we really see that technology is developing. As it develops, the price kind of comes down. It becomes more accessible. More and more people get access to these tools. Innovation can really happen. There are fab labs around the world, fabrication laboratories, which are kind of open access workshops that you can go. You can join like a gym membership, and then you get access to all these tools, including the training. So they have 3D printers, they have these CNC cutting machines, they have other things like laser cutters and things like robot arms that fold things. All these things are actually powering a whole load of innovation, and after that, small startups which are then making things locally. And so, yeah, we're seeing a whole range of things.
And one of the things you were telling me off camera earlier about the CNC machine is this is quite a simple technology. You can order the parts and set up something in your own house.
Yeah, I can just illustrate that, there's a thing called a Blackfoot machine, which is you can basically download the drawings, cut them out with a saw, like a hand saw, or a hand router, hook up your laptop or your PC, and you've basically got one of these machines, like a lo-fi version. You can then actually use that machine to cut parts for the machine to make the machine a higher resolution, so you can kind of improve itself. This is super low cost. You can basically download, I think some of the files are open source, as in free, some of them there's a small kind of design fee. But you know, for probably under £1,000, you could have a machine that would enable you to make a whole range of things, including open desk furniture, but many other things besides. And then it's just about sort of training and also, you know, the finishing. So you could actually produce a very highly finished, almost professional piece using a very lo-fi machine.
So you're kind of like, whilst it's a distributed network, it needs some sort of centralizing point where people can go to and find out about all the different nodes.
That's right, yeah. So it's, the Ovum Desk website is a collection of the designs, the digital designs for furniture, and then a network of workshops. So it's a kind of directory and a catalogue, if you like. Those designs, some of them were by us. Originally, we're architects by training. You know, we're not really furniture designers. And so we had a load of designers then contact us after we'd launched, sending us designs, and some of them were fantastic. And you can find those online, and there's a whole backlog of designs that we're still working on because we're a small team, and it takes a while to get things, sort of prototype them and make sure that they're engineered to the right sort of level. But yeah, we're sort of existing as a platform for emerging designers, and then the idea is that they get a route to market through many small workshops around the world.
I want to come to your backstory in just a minute, but first to this idea of how the modern world, I guess, was built. It was built in a multinational or a globalized way, I guess, a better way of putting it, where we perhaps in the global north produce the designs, and then the goods themselves get produced elsewhere.
That's right.
It's a very modern way, I guess, we tend to think of it. That's the way stuff gets made. That's the right way to do things, but you're seeing a chance to turn this on its head now with Open
I
Desk.
think that model has been critiqued heavily. There were reasons behind it, and we're not against globalization per se. I think it's great that things are global, but at the same time, some of these things don't necessarily make sense. So if you can have a machine or a person, well, it's always a person, but a person with a machine making something, why not have them as local as possible? Of course, there's cost implications. The old model, I think, relies on making things many, many thousands of miles away, which is kind of out of sight, conveniently, I would say, because that's where the land and the labor is cheapest. And then it relies on mass logistics, transportation, shipping, warehousing, retail markups come into play. It's often that there's a minimum order size, so you get huge stocks. Then you have discounting because you have things that you don't need. You know, there's a whole load of things that model are associated with that model, which I think are wasteful and could be better. And we still think there are some fantastic companies out there that use a model that's very different to ours. But there are, I think, some problems with that model. Of course, what we're talking about is something where, as a designer and a maker, and the maker can be one person in a garage, or it can be 20 people in a small factory-scaled workshop. But they're local to the city, ideally as local as possible. So for London, there are about 8 different manufacturers, and they have a kind of radius that they will serve. Some people might want to serve the whole of the UK, and we could take a view on that because we don't want to be too prescriptive. But really the idea is that it's as local as possible. So, you know, if you needed some furniture for your office, it's coming from maybe 10 to 20 minutes, maybe half an hour's drive away, rather than sort of many hours across the other side of the country or the other side of the planet.
And I guess people at home will be wondering about the economies of scale question. You get a major manufacturer to pump out 1,000 units of something at once in a far-off place where wages are probably low and the true cost of energy not built in and all that type of thing. The goods tend to be a lot cheaper than if they were made locally. So what's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, it's important to get, I think, the right fit. And one of the ideas with the Ovum Desk model is things are local, so they're made to fit the local market. So it's something that's, you know, the cost of material, the cost of labor, and those things are relative to the local market within reason. So we're talking about a table that's made in Sao Paulo in Brazil would be in Brazilian real, and it would be based on the cost of materials and labor in that city. It's going to be quite different to the cost in Sydney or the cost in, you know, London. So it's about, you know, local currency, local rates. But then obviously there's always going to be a cheaper option, and that's in part to do with the 20th century model we were talking about, where yes, you can actually make things really cheap if you do it in a way that is just sort of super mass produced, super efficient. There are companies doing that in a more responsible way, but there is still, I think, a lot of sort of critique of that model. In our case, there's also super high-end furniture manufacturers who, you know, it's sort of people prepared to pay quite a lot for certain furniture. So our idea is to sit in the middle and say, we're never going to be competing with the cheapest. That's a race to the bottom. We don't want to do that. We're actually existing as a platform to provide opportunities for designers and to send work to fantastic local workshops. So we don't want to shortchange the maker or the designer, but we tell both of them as a platform, it's important that the consumer, the customer, sees that this is good value, right? Otherwise, they're not going to buy it and nobody wins. So it has to be a reasonable price. I think people are increasingly happy to, I think, pay when they recognize value. So if they see something's local, sustainable, made of nice materials, robust, all these things, they're probably prepared to pay more than the baseline bottom cost, but they're probably not prepared to pay many thousands of pounds. So that's why we kind of sit.
The origin story of Ovum Desk I find really interesting, because you're not a maker by trade. Could you tell us about where this whole idea came from?
Sure. I'm an architect by training, and just gone back, right, so here's the original Ovum Desk. It's a long story, so you might have to cut me short, but it started with somebody I studied with. We still work together, two of the founders or co-founders. We designed a desk for somebody in Clerkenwell in London, a startup, a digital agency. They approached us as architects. They said, can you design our office? We said, yeah, we'd love to. When it came to the furniture, we started showing them some options. You know, there's a lot of furniture out there in the world.
Click through a catalogue.
Yeah, different things online, whatever. And they were like, no, we don't like this, we don't like this. We would like you to design something for us. So our actual response, honest response, was like, you don't want to get architects to design furniture because it's going to be expensive and it's going to be late. It's going to take ages, right? Because they're so picky, and you know, they were like, no, we want you to do it because as a digital agency, they're called Mint Digital. We're interested in design process, in digital tools. They're increasingly interested in going from software into hardware themselves. So they really pushed this, and we thought, okay, well, this is a great brief. I mean, we'd love to do it. Okay, very limited budget, but let's see. So we did our research, and we learned about CNC machining. We were talking about earlier, cutting out shapes. We looked at 3D printing. We looked at other things, but the CNC cutting just seemed like the most viable option. And we also found a workshop that was super close to their office. So we could all go there, we could look at it, the machine, we could talk to the guy running it, and we could learn about this process. So we actually designed the desk with them as a kind of co-designed session. It had to be on time and on budget, so it was, you know, big constraints, but we designed the desk and we had it. Then a little while later, we were looking into actually digital fabrication in general. We actually were looking at the Innovate UK. One of my co-founders, Nick, was actually doing some work with them about digital fabrication, and we wanted to test this idea of local fabrication. We were thinking initially about 3D printing, but then this moment came where with some of the others, we were sitting around in our office, which was a co-working space, and we had our furniture was in that co-working space because we'd furnished it. And we were looking around thinking, well, this desk is actually perhaps the best thing that we can use to just explore this idea. Like, why don't we build a super basic website, because we have the design already, we can host the design files for the desk, and we can maybe put a list of a couple of workshops in the London area, you know, that you could search for you with your postcode. A guy called James, who was one of the other co-founders, was our kind of technical lead. He did some work, and then he sort of expanded that so that you could actually start to search a bit wider. We built the website, we put it up, and we thought, okay, that's just a nice little idea. We can sort of, when we're talking to people, we can link them to the website and they can see a sort of demo. And what then happened a couple of days later was that the website crashed, and we actually thought to ourselves, okay, we just built like badly built thing, whatever, it fell over or something. And then James looked at it and he saw the analytics and he sort of said, no, hang on a minute, actually, the reason it crashed is because there's this huge spike and there's all these people who've come to see what we're doing. So we actually looked into where that was coming from. It was all coming from one site, and it was Hacker News. And they'd basically done a post about Ovum Desk and said, look, here's an interesting kind of company that's bridging between software and hardware for furniture. And then loads of people got excited about it. So it was a kind of accidental birth. We designed the desk before we had the idea for the company, so we weren't really thinking to have a startup, but then these things kind of happened, and we thought, okay, this is quite interesting. Why don't we see where we could take this? Then, as I mentioned, we started to get people sending designs to us. So we had one design, this desk. We got other designs. We actually asked on our website, we had a little form which we asked people kind of, what would you like the next design to be? We got loads of people that overwhelmingly wanted a standing height desk. So we basically started to work on that. We pulled in some external designs. We hosted a few more things. And it really started to kind of, sort of grow from there.
So it's tipping over at this point from being a nice chat you have around a table and getting a little bit excited about to something that seems like a venture that could become a job, a full-time job.
I think the crucial bit I missed was that the Mint Digital client had an office in New York as well as London. So we designed this desk for them, and they were expecting us, they wanted the same furniture in both offices, and I think they were expecting us to basically make double the amount in London and ship it. And we said to them, well, look, we found a workshop, a guy called Ian, found Ian's workshop. Why don't we just look for the sort of US equivalent of Ian, and we can make it there. We don't have to send it across, we don't have to send wood across the Atlantic. So that actually, we did do that, and we found the workshops in Brooklyn, and that's really what kind of nurtured the idea. And then after that, we sort of said, okay, as architects, this is a sort of hobby project, but this could be a bigger thing. We'd like to see if we can take this beyond just a kind of hobbyist, someone making it, for fun, but actually could this be a viable alternative for consumers? So could it be a viable choice that people could actually say, I'd like my desk made locally from sustainable materials, et cetera, rather than having to buy it in the traditional way. That's kind of what started it. Yeah.
And I know from there you went through a crowdfunding campaign, but it wasn't a straightforward buy our product on Kickstarter type campaign. It was something a bit different.
That's right. So with digital fabrication, one of the interesting things is a whole community of people around the world who are just very excited about it. All the different types, the laser cutting, the 3D printing, the CNC. There are maker fairs where people come together and share products, launch products, fab labs all over the world, growing all the time. So people have started talking about Ovum Desk in that community. There were also designers, graduates, people we knew who were excited about it because it was a new route for them to get their products to market. It's quite hard to get, as a young designer, to break into some of the established companies. And then there were companies saying, we like this aesthetic because, and we like this idea because increasingly workspaces were, the nature of work was changing. People wanted more sort of domestic friendly workspaces. People wanted their workspace to reflect them as a brand, their ethics, their ideas. They wanted it to just be more welcoming and sort of, ethically better. So all these things came together, and we said, well, actually, why don't we offer all these people a chance to actually own a small part of the company? So our kind of wider community, from makers, designers, kind of digital fabrication community, and also clients, And then rather than giving them a small bit of furniture, we'll actually give them some shares in the company. So we did that. So it was equity crowdfunded through Crowdcube, and we ended up with sort of over 200 very small shareholders.